So before I get into this and you just start hating me for making this video in general, let me say that a lot of people ask me about this question. I mean, come on, it's pretty intriguing to think about the two strongest characters outside of Saitama going at it, or just who in theory would be stronger than the other. And that's mainly what we're going to be looking at in this video. And you also might be thinking, well, we don't have nearly enough info to come up with an answer to that. And while that's kind of true, I think that we have just enough. I mean, come on, we have a whole bunch of info on one character and then, you know, kind of some on the other, but I think it's just enough. But in order to even get into that stuff, gonna have to go into some webcomic spoilers. So if you don't want to know what's gonna happen, I suggest you check out now. So I'm mainly just gonna be going over Blast's feats, or at least the ones that we're told about, as well as the exposition given on him, and just comparing Boros to that the best that we can. So if you're not into speculation, then this video isn't for you, because this one is just for fun. We're just going to be going over a whole bunch of stuff and seeing what happens. So let's see where they match up in the strength and just overall power department. So we're just going to see if Blast could even compete with Boros in this way. So I think that he could, because we know that took Elder Centipede to the brink of death when they had fought. And we can just assume that this was Blast by himself. It wasn't stated that he had any kind of help or anything like that. And also going off of what Giro/Psycho said, it's highly insinuated that he did this by himself. So that means that he's likely stronger than Bang and Bomb combined. Because, like, when they teamed up and did their Sunday best to him, they could only really, like, annoy him and, like, break his carapace. That was the best they could do. And he just took that and just molted and came back. As to where Blast by himself, you know, brought him to the brink of death. So I think that's a good starting line right there. But also, we're going to go to the data book here, because the quote that we get from Fubuki regarding Blast says that he is stronger than King. And the people of One Punch Man's world, they can only equate King's accomplishments to those of Saitama. So I think at this point in the data book, King had defeated at least Beefcake and Vaccine Man, meaning that they see Blast, or at least Fubuki does, as someone stronger than someone capable of taking them down. And I think that's where we can line up at least the base level of Boros' strength, definitely in his released state. But also the data book says that he can shoot lasers from his eyes, and we'll get into that. But it also says that he rules over psychic powers and the ability to command trillions of robots. So we could just speculate about what this truly means, and I think it might possibly mean that there is no Esper ability or anyone with the Esper abilities that can, like, hold down Blast or restrain him or overpower him. You know, the way that we see Tatsumaki using her Esper abilities on many characters throughout the series. We even see that her, in her weakened state, is able to even restrain Awakened Garo for a moment or two. And at her best, even, you know, still recovering from her damaged state, she was able to lift Saitama, like, 2 feet off the ground. So this might be implying that, like, not even Tatsumaki, in theory, would be able to restrain Blast, because he's just so crazy powerful. And the robot line, of course, I assume is referring to Metal Knight, which might be implying that not even Metal Knight can really do anything to Blast. But let's go back to the shooting laser beams from his eyes, because this might be one of his main abilities that he has, but it also might be pointing to him being the allegory for Superman in this story, which is something I talk about in my Why Saitama is Going to Fight Blast video. So if Blast is truly one's allegory for Superman, then he's likely just as powerful as a character like that would be, not just from, like, an overall standing, but like a physical strength aspect. So I assume that, just in theory, that someone that could solo Elder Centipede to the brink of death, someone that is stated to be stronger than King, someone who can't be overcome by Esper abilities. Oh, and she also says that she speculates that he can defeat the entire S-Class at once. This all kind of lines up with what we would assume about Boros, more or less. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who would probably debate that a full-power Tatsumaki could probably do well against Boros, which, like I said, is debatable, and it could be argued, but this info from the data book is kind of throwing that out the window. So this might be giving us some insight that Blast, at the minimum, is as strong as Boros from a physical aspect, but might even be stronger than him. But also, the shooting the laser from his eyes, which I assume is similar to Superman's, maybe it's like Homelander's from The Boys. We're not really sure how big and powerful they are, but that might be his answer to Boros' energy blast that he does from his chest when he releases his internal energy. So now that we have a rough idea about their strength just from a physical aspect, let's go into their speed, because we know Boros is one of the fastest, if not the fastest characters besides Saitama that we have seen so far. So in his released form, when he's competing against Saitama, we don't really have a good measurement of how fast he's moving. We could just kind of guess off of the visual context. But in my opinion, it's very similar to what we see Flashy Flash do against Saitama recently in chapter 113 of the webcomic. So now, when Flashy Flash is connecting with Saitama and using his techniques on him, it doesn't really do anything. As to where when Boros connects with Saitama, he's sending him all over the place and, landing marks on him and stuff. But I think that's just showing the difference in power, of course, between Boros and Flashy Flash. But the speed, the dynamics of it is very similar. I mean, Saitama seemingly trying to touch Flashy Flash is unable to. Now, granted, in the end of their little sparring exchange, Saitama is going to get the better of Flashy Flash, but Genos interrupts it, and it's over. But before that, Saitama wasn't able to touch Flashy Flash. But it also goes into how hard was he trying, but also how hard was he trying against Boros. Because we never really know with Saitama, but I'm just going off of what we see here, and I honestly do think that released Boros' performance is very similar to that of what we saw of Flashy Flash in chapter 113. So with all of that being said, we also know that Blast defeated the strongest ninja in history, the Dark Leader of the ninjas, and put him in a coma. So I'm just going to assume that at the minimum, the strongest ninja in history, one that the other ninjas, including Hellfire and Gale, see as some deity-like figure and they regard him as the strongest ever. I'm going to assume that at the minimum, he's just as fast as Flashy Flash. I mean, don't you think that's fair to assume? Now, him being the strongest ever and Flashy Flash not getting that title might mean that he is faster and stronger than Flashy Flash. Just taking a guess here. We don't know for sure yet. But we do know that Blast was able to defeat this guy and put him in a coma that lasted 15 years. So I'm going to assume that means that Blast is pretty fast himself if he's able to compete with the strongest ninja ever. And we know that ninjas are all about speed. That's their prerequisite of their skills and whatnot. So I think it's fair to assume that the quote-unquote strongest ninja ever is probably the fastest ninja ever as well. Meaning that Blast is ridiculously fast in his own right, which means that he could probably keep up with Boros in the speed department. And also, Superman is pretty fast too, so if we're going back to the allegory thing, he's not only going to be having a similar strength to Superman, but probably a similar speed as well. So the real difficult thing to answer here is if Blast could deal with Meteoric Burst, because we know that Meteoric Burst is the highest form of power that Boros has, and I've only really been comparing feats to what we have seen from released Boros, and obviously Meteoric Burst takes that to the next level. So, is Blast trying his hardest? Maybe on the level of Meteoric Burst? Well, there's no real way to know for sure, but we could just assume that maybe he could. Just take it a guess. If someone with the feats of Blast and the hyped exposition behind him, trying his hardest at his full power, in theory, could be similar to what we have seen of Meteoric Burst Boros. But that also brings us to the next question of, let's just say Meteoric Burst Boros decides to use the Collapsing Star Roaring Cannon. We just got to put it out there. There's no real reason why he would use it, but he does have it. He is capable of using it, so it needs to be proposed. Could Blast deal with this? And that's another unknown. Could he defend against it in his own way? I mean, he's obviously not going to punch it away because only really Saitama could do that, at least as far as we know. But maybe, I don't think his Eye Blast could deal with that. It doesn't seem like his Eye Blast have the same kind of planet-busting power that the Collapsing Star Roaring Cannon does. But could Blast deal with it in some other way? It is unknown at this point. So we're just going to have to leave that on the table for now. So before I go into my conclusion, I just want to say that given all of the information that we've gone over so far, I think it's fair to say that Blast and Boros are pretty relative in power. Just take it a guess, of course, but if you go off of the feats and the performances and comparing them like we have, I mean, don't you think it's not too outlandish to come up with the reasoning that I have? But in conclusion, I'm just going to say that Blast is probably stronger than Boros. I mean, aside from all of the stuff that we've talked about, I also speculate that Blast is going to be fighting Saitama. More so that he's going to be Saitama's next big fight in the series. Like the first one was Boros, then we had Awakened Garo, and I think the third one is going to be Blast. And due to that, and the progression of the story and characters need to get stronger for the stakes to raise and for Saitama to have a tougher fight, that might mean that Blast is stronger than Boros, because he's going to have to give Saitama a tougher fight than Boros to make the story more interesting. So just off of that, it could mean that Blast is stronger than Boros. Also, he might be the allegory for friggin' Superman, and Superman's insane. I mean, regardless of the iteration of him, just the idea of Superman is crazy, and I assume that Blast is probably going to be crazy as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. I know, it probably made some of you guys mad, but I'm sure some of you guys enjoyed it too. But let me know what you think about Blast versus Boros, or just who is stronger in your opinion between these two characters. Also, if you liked the video, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon. It gives you access to a weekly Q&A. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day. See you in the next one.